dismissive personally about any possibility after 1967 of transfers and new genocide and the like. I always thought that the world has moved actually beyond this. I felt threatened but also protected in a way with the international legal system and with the UN and with allies and foes and balances of power and what have you. I always thought that these are very far-fetched kind of thoughts when people fear that they will sort of throw us out or something of the sort might happen. Recently, I started personally thinking that I might be dismissive of reality when I dismiss such a possibility, and that the current world order, not only Israel actually, the current world order does have sufficient genocide. It's happening here and there. Cleansings are happening in Asia. Wars are actually growing, not dwindling. The numbers of people that are dying is also growing. The relation to immigrants and refugees, this sort of notion of unified world. It's a globalized world, but not for everybody. As with the Tajik's words, not everyone is eligible to enter this one global village. Eligibility is limited. It's global but exclusive in a way. And I do have fears that we might be, as Palestinians, or most of the Palestinians at least, are part of those who are not eligible to maintain existence. When I met Ilan on an occasion, what is it, about a month ago, right?
Yeah.
About a month ago, what came to my mind is, because he's a historian, is to do a historical comparison between the period I don't know, that's for the land to tell you, but maybe 1929 up to 1947 or 8, compared to the last, say, 15, 20 years, or at least from 29, post-1929 and post-2008. Maybe it is related to the global economic crisis, for example. Maybe there are such considerations. But my idea was, can we compare structurally the historical moment that preceded the Nakba and the current historical moment and see if there are any similarities that might lead us to think more of a coming up new Nakba or ala Nakba. Something like that. So, without much ado, I'll give the floor to Ilan, and we agreed democratically, Ilan and I, that he will run the show, play it by ear, a bit informally, without much. So please, feel free to interact the way you feel like.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I don't know exactly how to play it by the ear, but I suggest maybe I will give a kind of an opening thoughts, and then we can open it up to discussion with someone. Talking about structures is quite fashionable nowadays among historians, because there is a sense that history is not anymore a project by which you tell someone everything you know about a certain event, and you are the only person who knows about that particular moment in history, nobody else. It's your territory. This used to be the old kind of historical work, but I think since then history has wedded itself with social sciences, became far more interdisciplinary, and also far more conscious, especially this is true about contemporary history, modern history, of its connection to the present. Nobody invents the wheel. I think those of you who are familiar with the philosophy of history know that also the ancient Greeks have already thought about these dilemmas, so we're not progressing that much when we talk philosophically about what is what is the past? How do we reconstruct the past? What is the importance of the past? I don't think, like on questions of love and hate and death, I think humanity has not done a great deal in the last 1,000 years. Anyway, but structuralism, even post-structuralism, became very important entry points for discussing history. And in some of you know, or I know from talking to you before, that one of the structural paradigms that pervaded or invaded in a way the study of Palestinian history, or the history of on the history of Palestine in modern time is indeed a structural perspective, and this is the paradigm of settler colonialism, which is old and new and fashionable and attractive. My man was very useful for analyzing at least the Zionist side of the story. I think it's a bit more complicated if you adopt it from a Palestinian perspective. But there is something there that I think is the beginning of an answer to the question that you have posed, that because settler colonialism is a structure, not an event, and if Zionism is settler colonialism and it's not an event, it's quite obvious in a way that certain historical chapters of Zionism do not, of course, repeat themselves exactly the same way they were, but they have a lot in common, because the same ideology is behind the Zionist policies in the 1920s and is behind the Israeli policies in the 21st century. And the same impulses, ideological, moral, human impulses, that inform Zionism at the beginning of its history, inform Israel today. So I think that, although I fully understand the importance of also thinking about the neoliberal paradigm as a critical neoliberal paradigm as one to look as another angle for looking at the comparison between different historical periods in order to understand better what lies ahead in the future. I will focus a bit more on settler colonialism, but I will inject the neoliberal side a bit later. Maybe if we can bring it up also in the discussion. I'll do what I can there. So let me start with the connection between settler colonialism and the last Israeli nationality. I think that's a good place to begin. As an answer to your questions, are we facing the possibility, for those who came late, the question we posed was, are we facing, is it possible, with it might be, that we are facing similar catastrophic Israeli policies today as the Palestinians were facing them in 1948? I'm minimizing your, I'm reducing what you said, but I think it's a good entry point. And I think that if this is, if we take Zionism as a settler colonialist movement, we can see where we can understand the structural side of it as an explanation for the nationality law as a law that may define strategically what the current Israeli political, military, and economic elite envisages as the future. So let me start with the present and I'll move back rather than going from the past into the present. The nationality law, to my mind, is yet another manifestation of the fact that although on many levels and issues, the group that runs the state of Israel is not very strategic on this particular question, Palestinian question, there is strategic thinking, contrary to what people say. I think Israel is very strategic when it comes to Palestine and the Palestinians. I wouldn't say, for instance, if you will ask me, does Israel have a strategic vision about natural resources? Does it have a strategic vision about poverty, social welfare, cultural identity? I would be very hesitant to agree with someone who would tell me the group who runs the country, the state in this case, the state of Israel, are strategic in thinking. I would say no. I think what really characterizes their way of doing things is ad hoc. They react to realities, tactical in their thinking, but I don't think it's true when it comes to what they would probably call the Palestinian problem, or the Palestinians. It doesn't matter. I'm sure each one of them, if it's the head of the security service, or the national advisor to the prime minister, or members of the National Security Council, I'm sure they're all using some different languages and some different terms, but it boils down to what we, as an ideological movement, as a state, what are we planning vis-a-vis the main problem that we are facing as we see it as Israelis, as the main existential problem. And I think that even we should not be misled by the kind of foggy situation that sometimes someone like Netanyahu can create, saying that Israel's existential problem is the Iranian nuclear capacity, or the Hezbollah's military missiles, and so on. I think that this is kalam fadi. As far kalam fadi, I mean by the sense that the strategists in Israel do not see these issues as existential problems. I'm not saying they don't see these issues as problems, but they definitely are not devoting a lot of time to discussing strategically what to do vis-a-vis these issues. Of course, they have tactical, again, as I said, they have tactical reactions. So today it's an alliance with Saudi Arabia, tomorrow it is supporting a tough American position on Iran. But these are not strategies. These are really reactions to an unfolding reality. However, from my own studies, I came to the conclusion from very early on. If it was not that cruel, I would say it would be impressive. But it's not impressive because I'm giving the price. It's impressive in the sense that even when they were few, powerless, even before they had a full foothold in this country, or even when they thought that their future is a bit iffy, because they were not sure whether Britain would stay or Britain would help them. With all these uncertainties of a small group of settlers who moved into a foreign land, they were always very clear strategically on the Palestinian issue. And I think the nationality law is just another manifestation of this clarity, compared to other things that Israel is doing, which is not clear, which is full of paradoxes, which is full of holes. The nationality law is not full of holes. The nationality law is a very clear text. It's one of the clearest legal texts that ever Israel produced about the Palestinians. It's not so much about the Israelis, it's about the Palestinians. This law is about the Palestinians. So, what does the law tell us about the current strategy, which I claim, as you probably understand, is not just the current strategy. I think it was always the Zionist strategy. It goes back to maybe the two basic dimensions of any settler colonial movement: the geographical dimension and the demographic dimension. Geographical dimension means that at any given moment, from the inception of such an ideological movement to the moment we are now, when the settlers have a state, power, and international standing, the question of space, of geography, is an important question. Is a strategic question. Is a strategic question. One of the manifestation of how Israelis strategically think about geography is that they have no respect whatsoever for international boundaries, and they don't like to to determine openly final boundaries, if you notice. There's never final boundaries for the Zionist project. There is a vague message to the world. This is the land of the Bible, this is Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, there is mandatory Palestine. Yes, if you push them as members of the international community to what is the space in which geography matters, they would vaguely say the land of the Bible, Palestine, whatever. I mean, again, it depends who you ask and in what period of history and what is the condition. But it's quite a phenomenal issue that from 1882 to 2018, this is a very important part of the geographical dimension of science. Don't define your borders in an infinite way. Leave it open. You never know whether capacity, circumstances, your ability, the other side's deficiencies will enable you to expand the territory. Yes, there will be tactical debates from 1882 up to today. Is this the right moment to expand? Does expansion require direct control? Maybe expansion can be achieved by indirect control. Maybe you can subcontract your control to someone else, and therefore you have a different definition of where the borders go. There's the first border, the second border, and so on. But geography, and this is strategic, this is not confusion. I read a lot of analyses of Israeli policy saying the Israelis are confused and they don't. There are a few books that talk about borders in Zionism. And I think Zionism is a borderless movement, intentional borderless movement. It's in the nature of the settler colonial project, unless the people who initiated it feel that they reached the completion, full success, you have to leave it all. And therefore, the absence of the clear definition of the borders in the nationality law is not a mistake. It's not an absence that is sloppy. It's part of the same ideology. And if you read the text, you can see, as was the case, I would say, more or less from the 1920s. There's all the time interchange between two concepts. Medinat Israel, the state of Israel, and Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. The state of Israel is the one that relates to the issue of rights. Who has rights and who has not rights within what they call the state of Israel. They don't define it. Eretz Israel is mentioned with regard to future settlement, colonization, what they call in Hebrew Ikyashut. That is, I think Ikyashut, the best translation of the word Ikyashut is colonization. It's colonization, settlement, call it. I'm sure there are some synonyms there, but we understand what we're talking within this context. So, demographically and geographically, of course, you cannot gather from the geographical ambition, you can't gather at least directly, an answer about the danger of another ethnic cleansing and so on to the second dimension, which is the demographic dimension. Zionism from the very beginning, as settler colonial movements do, does not only deal with the space, it deals with the native indigenous people as an existential issue. What will be the fate, or rather, what should we do about the fate of the local population? Now, it is true that there is always a difference between a young ideological movement facing the first hardships and hurdles and how articulated it is in answering questions like this and an established state 120 years later. I wouldn't say that the same level of articulation can be found in 1882 as it is found today, of course. You arrive for the first time, you can still fantasize about maybe what they would call voluntary transfer, or I don't know, converting to Judaism the local population, or population exchange. But these are all part of the same strategy. And the strategy is very clear. You are the indigenous people, you are the natives, and the natives are the foreigners, are the aliens. You can either tolerate the presence, if you think that existentially it's possible, or if you think that existentially the presence is dangerous, you have to take action according to your capacity, the circumstances, and so on. And therefore, I think that the brutality of the means, what you were talking about, it's not a genocide, not a ethnic cleansing, not catastrophic, is not a matter of strategy. I mean, strategy doesn't deal necessarily with what would be the right means to achieve demographic exclusivity in the space. No, this is left for each generation to decide, according to the circumstances, what is the best way of ensuring either total demographic control, or if not total demographic control, then an absolute demographic control. Some of you are probably familiar with a very famous quote from David Brunon's diary. It's actually not from his diary, it's one of the speeches he gave around the partition resolution, November 1947. Um, he was not the only one. He examined the partition resolution according to these two dimensions, the geographical dimension and the demographic dimension of the settler colonial project. You can see why geographically the fact, from their perspective, that they were only offered, if you want, half of the country, was not a problem. It was never a problem for Benjamin, because we don't define our final borders. Borders will change, and they will change according to our capacity, according to the circumstances. So, if the quid pro quo for accepting the geographical dimension is international recognition in the idea of the Jewish state, we should accept the partition resolution, because that is not the important thing. The important thing is that we have a foothold that can expand. But demographically, he was much more worried about the partition resolution. He said, geography can change. We can be military capable of taking more of the parts of Palestine that had been accorded to us. He was quite confident of the ability of the Israeli army to take over more than the 54 or so percent that the United Nations partition resolution offered. But he was much more worried about demography. He said that the United Nations does not understand the idea of a Jewish state, because according to the partition resolution, within the Jewish state, almost half of the population was meant to be Palestinians. And he said, even if the Jewish state would have 40% of Palestinians, or as he said, non-Jews, if we would have even 40% of non-Jews, as he put it, or Arabs, then it's not a viable state, he said. You cannot have a Jewish state with 40% of non-Jews as part of its citizenship. Right? And then historians would argue, was he explicit or not explicit in saying, I know what we should do because of that. And I, for one, think that he says very clearly, we have to deal with it drastically. And I think he meant already ethnic cleansing. Other historians go on a bit more pedantic, maybe about interpretive methodology of document, and say, if he didn't say it exactly, maybe this developed later. Oh, okay, I don't think it's that important. What is important is that demographically, the settler movement and the settler state after this, demographically, sees the demographic issue, demographically, it sees the issue of the presence of Palestinians as an existential issue, Of course, the most interesting group in this respect, if I will be my devil's advocate, people would say to me, but there's liberal Zionism, there is the left in the Zionist political system, people who fought against the imposition of military rule of the Palestinian minority in Israel. Even Menachem Begin fought against the imposition of military rule. They are, after 67, the Israeli peace camp that wants to withdraw from the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And I say, yes, these are correct quotes of their positions. But what do they tell us about the demographic ideology? The demographic ideology of people who want to, in the Israeli left, to get out of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip is that maybe this is the only way of ensuring demographic majority inside Israel. So ideologically and morally, it's the same position. Tactically, yes, it's different. You say, one group says, I'm willing to give up some of the geography. And remember, because geography changes all the time. So I'm willing to give some of the geography for the sake of demography. But nobody is willing to give up demography. Nobody is willing to give up demography. So the nationality law, coming back to the nationality law, and just take that's how does it work? No, I'm Italian advisor. Yeah. Okay. The nationality law on the demography, if you read carefully the law, says the following things. And I think this is very important for us, and in answering your question. It says within what would be, what is and would be the state of Israel. What is and would be the state of Israel. And there's a clear indication that the state of Israel today is not the final word, because the nationality law wants all the successive governments to support further colonization, not in the state of Israel, in the land of Israel. In the land of Israel, right? So it's very clear that the state of Israel would expand according to the colonization of the land of Israel. Does this sound confusing? It's clear? It's clear? What I'm saying? Yeah? Okay. Eretz Israel, you understand? Okay. Okay. You understand? Yeah, exactly. You're right. Okay. So, the colonization would be the factor that would determine the future borders of the state of Israel. And this is now a foundational law in the Knesset, right? It's not just a policy declaration or a lecture by the Prime Minister. It's a foundational law, which has a lot of implications. You can't change easily a foundational law in Israel. It means that it will affect budgets, policies, priorities, and so on. Now, within what is and would become the state of Israel, there can only be one national group, and only one group is entitled for the right of self-determination. That's what the law says. Only one group. It also says that the other group has the right for its own language, only its language, nothing else. Its own language collectively, but even that collective right has been downgraded from the laws before, which granted Arabic the title of the second official language. Now it's a language with a special status. That's what the law says. It will be with special status. And anybody who's familiar with Zionist texts, the last thing you want to be within a Zionist text is to be with a special status. It's not a good thing to be with a special status. It basically means that you are not part of what the Republican kind of Republican ideas is the common good, or the citizenship. Exactly. You are, by law, through the language, they tell you that you are second-rate citizen. That's why the Druze community finally woke up in Israel understanding that they are defined by the language, not by their particular way of worshiping Allah, not by their claim for being a separate sect than the Muslims or the Christians or even the Palestinians in general. The reason that they were really alarmed was that finally they saw in the most clear way in the law that the definition of non-Jew is through the language, not through the nationality, not through the ethnicity, not through race, but through the language. So it was very clear that they are an Arabic-speaking citizens, serving in the army, not serving in the army, policing the occupied territories, not policing the occupied territories, their language is Arabic. This is also a very important message, not that it was needed anymore. It's came a bit late in the day for the Jews who came from Arab countries, but it was not necessary. But they were a bit worried about these new intellectuals among these Russian Jews who want to revive Arabic as their mother tongue, going back to Arabic music and so on, trying to build their Mizrahi kind of identity, also with strong Arab foundation, cultural foundation. The message in the nationality law is music, okay, food, very nice. Tell us a special way of prayer, because it's a bit different in the Sephardic and Ashkenazi. It's all fine, but not Arabic. Not Arabic. If you don't want to be the people who speak the language of the special status, because it means you are second-rate citizens. Now, this is, I think, a very significant stage in the settler colonial movement, because historically, you can see, and I'm not going to mention all the stations. As I said, it's an informal talk, so forgive me that I'm not giving you a straightforward historical section, but I know many of you know anyway this history. But if you move from the 1930s, when the Zionist movement goes to Britain and says to Lord Peel and the government of Britain, to London, work towards a population exchange. This would be the best for everyone. Palestinians would move either to the Arab part of Palestine or to Transjordan, because the idea was that Transjordan and the Arab part of Palestine would be the same one, right? And we will have even a smaller part of Palestine than we hope for, but at least demographically it will be purely Jewish. That doesn't work. I don't have to tell you about this. Then comes the partition resolution. Again, geographically, it gives the Zionist movement more than the Pew Commission did, but it is not at all interested after the Second World War in transfer or exchange of population. It's very clear that morally, this is now not politically correct. And so many people became refugees because of the war. It's not politically correct to say that the United Nations would initiate expulsion of people in order to get a political solution. Not that the Zionist movement didn't do all it could to convince the United Nations to include transfer of population in the partition resolution, but this was even for the United Nations. So I think that's why they decided to initiate the ethnic cleansing. And we succeeded in expelling half of the Palestinian population and taking 78% of them. I think 67 created for them another opportunity as they saw it. Geographically, they solved the problem as far as they're concerned. But even then, they didn't declare it final borders. Even when they had the River Jordan, they had the Suez Canal, they had the Golan Heights, they still did not define it as final borders. And most of their energy went not so much to the geography, it's always true about settler colonial movement. It is devoted, it's channeled to the demography. And I think strategically, it fitted them very well to think in a way that used the geographical idea of partition to solve the problem of demography. I'll explain what I mean. If you cannot, as they came to understand, what made you a bit relaxed in the sense of not being under danger of being expelled, as they did, it does seem that they did understand that they cannot use the 67 war, or even the situation after the 67 war, for a massive expulsion as 1914. This is, by the way, they documented, the documents are there, but you don't even need the documents. You know that the strategic decision after 67 was not to expel massively the people of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, but to tolerate the demographic presence while winning the geographical asset of having every one of them defined it differently, having the right borders, the rights, the ancient land of Israel, it doesn't matter. But the idea was that geography works for us. We're still left with a demographic issue. So you use partition. You divide the Palestinian as much as you can to different categories, to different places. You disconnect the geographic places from one another, and you get the same result as expulsion, in the sense that A, you control it better, B, you can not calculate them. You don't have to calculate them in the demographic balance. So either you play with it, you fantasize yourself, or you lie to yourself, or you really believe in it, that if people are enclaved in a village or a town, or in a cluster of villages and towns, they are not part of your demographic balance. Yes, they are present on the land, but they are not present in your demographic calculation. You can say, it's very interesting to ask ourselves as historians, did they lie to themselves, or were they so powerful to be right to think that they could dehumanize the Palestinians to the extent by saying they live in Ramallah, they live in Bethlehem, they live in Nablus, and they live in Gaza, but they're right that from their powerful perspective, they don't have to be counted in the demographic balance that they think is threatening their Jewish state. And here comes the question that I think we all have to ask, and you have asked the question. Is the group that is making the decision today, and will make the decision tomorrow? I don't have to give you the names of the group, but Israel is not such a big political outfit. It's quite easy to define the centers of power, the centers of decision making, and it's not very complex. You know more or less who are the people who advise, who are the people who take the decision, who are the people who would decide on such dramatic questions like the one you have posed, right? Now, if you read carefully the nationality law, my conclusion from this is the following. We can allow ourselves to have the nationality law because we don't have to worry that much. Namely, we have created already the geographical structure of control. Area A, Area B, Area C, the Gaza ghetto. We now have a legal system also towards the Palestinians who are citizens of Israel in the nationality law. And given the realities in the region, which are working to our advantage, the international reality which works in our advantage, right? For the time being, we don't have to drastically deviate from what we are already doing. I mean, we don't need to, upgrade our methodology. We can use the same methodology. Yes, we have a certain problem in the Gaza Strip, but we know how to deal with it. We don't have any particular problems in the West Bank. And sometimes we think we have some problems with the Palestinians inside Israel, but basically it's under control. There is a creeping worry about the fact that the governments in the world do not reflect anymore what the civil society in the world thinks about it. They call it delegitimization, the new anti-Semitism. They really devote a lot of energy and money to fighting BDS and similar kind of phenomena. I think this strategic group of people, this group of strategists, takes this very, very seriously. I think they do. When they say that they see the strategic threat, they mean it. They mean it. But that doesn't mean that it will affect in any way the decision of how to deal with the demographic issue. Two final points, and then I'll open it up, which I think are worth thinking about in this connection. The first is the personality of Netanyahu. It doesn't have to be a really important factor, but I think it's worth mentioning. Someone who succeeded for so long to recapture again and again the office of the prime minister, sometimes against the odds of observers, right? Who is motivated by the stay in power, I think, more than anything else. I don't think he has a clear ideology or even strategy. I don't think he plays a very important role in Israeli strategy. I think the relationship between him and the people around him who are ideologues of settler colonialism, very much like the relationship between Trump and Pence, where you are in a position in America where you say, oh my God, if they impeach Trump, we will have the real maniac, the real nutcase as the president of the United States. And we will long for the days that we had Trump, who was childish, not very intelligent, and sometimes can be moved in one direction or the other. Pence is not stupid, doesn't have a small vocabulary of words, and he knows exactly that he has a worldview that he wants to impose, both in America and on the world. And sometimes Trump is the boundary, so it's the last hurdle on the way. In many ways, I think it's important to look at Netanyahu in such a way, in the sense that his main priority is to stay in power. His main priority is not to translate his strategy into reality. First comes the wish to be in power. Sometimes it's a positive, sometimes it's good news, sometimes it's bad news. It depends on the reality. But I think one should not be, what I'm trying to say with this note is don't be mesmerized or blurred by his personal problems, by personality and so on. He is less important, I think, for any one of us who lives here and wants to know what the future holds for us. That's why we have this conversation. It's much more important. It's not a nice job, but it's much more important to study other personalities in the group of strategies in Israel if you want to understand where they're going to. It's not Netanyahu's worldview that is important. It's other people's worldview, which is much more important. And it fits so well with the worldview of the conceptors, leaders, and ideologues of the Zionist movement in the beginning of its history in this country. If you read the early Zionist ideologues, they were very verbose. They wrote endlessly. It's amazing how much they've written. Luckily for the historians, they wrote a lot. If you read what they have written and you try to understand Israeli strategy today, you can understand best the idea that settler colonialism is a structure. That there is a mindset, that there is a certain perception of the natives, of the indigenous, there's a certain idea of who you are and what's your connection to the land, what are you entitled to do in the land. The gap between their writing and the way of contemporary thinking is not very wide. The second and final comment I want to have is the following. I think that whatever one thinks about the debate of one state and two states, I'm sure this is a debate that is worth having at any given moment of time. It's important to read the nationality law as a clear Israeli declaration that Israel is not committed, not interested, does not have any engagement with the two-state solution. This is very clear. What is even more interesting, I think, is how the potential opposition parties, like what is called the Zionist camp, which is the previous Labour Party, and Mr. Lapid, who's kind of the centrist party that everybody predicts will do quite well in the next election. Kadima, it's not Kadima, there's a future party. If you read their reaction to the nationality law, in the context of a solution with the Palestinians, not so much as in the context of what they would say, we would have liked to see more about equality, they say, in the law. The law is okay, but it doesn't have enough about equality. That sums up their criticism. But of course, they didn't join the demonstration of the Palestinians in Israel. They said this is a Palestinian demonstration. But that connects well. And all of them went to the Druze demonstration, right? This connects very well with what they think about the future. It was, I would probably best articulate it. As you know, Israelis have sometimes a tendency to commemorate historical events according to the Hebrew calendar, not just according to the Latin calendar. And Oslo, according to the Hebrew calendar, happened 25 years ago, 3 days ago, according to the Hebrew calendar. So the Israeli radio, with this new injection of nationalism or romantic nationalism or chauvinistic nationalism, decided to talk about Oslo not on the 13th of September, but according to the Hebrew date, which was about 3 days ago. And one of the persons they interviewed was Gilad Shaer. Those of you remember, Gilad Shaer was the highest legal authority. He was a private lawyer and was recruited to the Israeli team of the Oslo Accord, and he was really the legal mind behind the Israelis' idea of what Oslo should be. Gilad Shaer. And Gilad Shaer said the following. He said, yes, I admit that the Oslo Accord is gone. He said, it's gone. And
Is this the one who entered the negotiations for Rabin?
got engaged, exactly. Rabin got engaged. You're absolutely right. He was not one of what we used to call the Paris boys. He was one of the Rabin boys. Yeah, that is absolutely right. And he said, well, we have to admit that at least there is consensus now that a mixture of what he said, a mixture of Israeli unilateral actions, a mixture of unilateral Israeli actions, and very low-profile tactical agreements with the PA would replace the basic idea of Oslo. So the interviewer asked him, is this a vision of the future, or is it just something you propose for the next year? And he said, no, that's the vision for the future. This is what Oslo created for all the forwards. I think that fits very well with what I'm trying to say here, that for any one of us who wants to think either as an individual, or as an activist, or as an academic, or as a politician, whatever your ambition to influence your life through your own life or through the work with others, I think it's very important to look the reality in the face and understand that this sacred status quo, as the Israelis see it, they think the status quo is sacred, is the main Israeli strategy. It's the main Israeli strategy. Therefore, it would be, and with this I answer your question, I think it would be totally against their way of thinking to look for a dramatic event such as massive expulsion, war with Gaza even. Not that it couldn't happen, of course. Elements in this scenario which I cannot predict, of course. But as far as they are concerned, there's something for me as an activist who wants to come back from England and to work with the civil society to change things. Something I have to take into account that this is, on the one hand, easier, somehow easier when the things you suspect and you claim are hidden. And people say, show me the proof for your fantasy. Because you're not right. It's not an apartheid state. It's not an ethnic cleansing operation. It's not inhuman. It's not racist. On the one hand, it's very easy because you don't need anymore to be very complex in your analysis. They are doing the job themselves. It's very clear. Because they really think that historically they are successful. And they don't think, by the way, that this is only a conjuncture of regional developments or international development. They think that it proves, almost like a teleological thing, that this proves that they were always right. That they were always right. They don't think that they have bought, let's say, a Saudi king. They think that the Saudi kings understand now history. You should read the Israeli Orientalist, the Dayan Center in Tel Aviv, or experts in Saudi Arabia. It's fascinating. That's their understanding. They said, finally, you have an Arab leader who understands history. He's on the side on the right side of history. They don't care if you will bring them evidence of whether people were induced or intimidated to take a certain position. No, they say that we are on the right side of history. We always claim that we were. There were moments in our history when it was not clear, when we had our doubts about it, but not in 2018. 2018 proves that we were right to say that you can have a democratic, these are my words, not theirs, that you can have a racist, exclusive, apartheid Jewish state in any part of Palestine that you want without losing your international legitimacy, without fearing any effective Palestinian resistance or a pan-Arab resistance or an international condemnation to the level that would undermine your success. This is an important mindset because it seeps into the education system, into the cultural system, into the media, and poses questions for those of us who think that maybe there's a chance for a change from within the Israeli society. Maybe we should hope that the Israeli peace camp would get its act together and therefore there will be a stronger lobby for a two-state solution, or that the international community's commitment to the two-state solution is far more important than the strategy of Israelis and so on. I think this sends a message from Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, wherever these people sit, which is very clear. Yes, I'm not saying it's going to succeed, don't misunderstand me. I think young Jews around the world find this message disturbing, much more disturbing than ever they found it before. A lot of Jews could square the circle of supporting Israel, criticizing it, supporting peace, finding itself very difficult now to square the circle. So it creates a lot of problems for Israel among Jewish communities, not so much among Christian Zionists, but among Jewish communities, among public opinion. I'm not saying that it's working. I'm just trying to convey their perception that it is working. And I can do a final prediction. In the next Israeli election, you will work very hard. If you look, probably will have about 13 parties, competing for the election. You will find it very hard to find in the platforms of any of the parties any serious mentioning of the conflict with the Palestinians as an issue which dawns the color of this particular party, or that this party would think that it's important to win the support of the electorate because they have a clear idea. No, this is a closed issue for most of them. This is not the issue that you are now fighting over the electorate's support. You're fighting about something else, as if this issue has been resolved, and therefore it doesn't have, of course, it narrows down the ideological differences even more. Okay, I think I'll stop here.
Please just repeat what you said about Gilad Shaar's vision.
Yeah, Gilad Shaar.
That little bit I just missed.
Oh, okay. Gilad Shaar said that the future, as he sees it, is a mixture between unilateral Israeli actions on the ground, such as annexation, there we see, the Jordan Valley, and tactical agreements with the PA that will make it easier to fight outbursts of extremism, whether it's in Gaza or in the West Bank. Okay, that's for instance, he thinks that between Abu Mazen and Israel and the Egyptian president, you can get the Hudna for 5 years in the Gaza Strip. The Hudna is not strategy, but it fits the Israeli strategy. Because in the Israeli strategy, the Gaza Strip was never meant to be a quiet place. But the fact that it's not a quiet place does not undermine this. I hope you understand this. Doesn't undermine the sense of success among the Israelis. Again, I'm not sure it will work, because that means that certain Israelis would pay the price, those who live next to the Gaza Strip. But in the big scheme of things, from Tel Aviv, this is the price you pay. It's the price you pay. One of them mentioned the fact that in 1981, the PLO was fighting Katyushas almost on a daily basis into Jewish settlements on the Lebanon border, And the government said the same. They said, we have a strategy. Sometimes you pay the price, sometimes someone else pays the price. But this is life in Israel. Anyone who thinks that there is an Israeli dream to live in a normal society without war, with peace, with a permanent solution, does not understand. I think the mentality of a settler colonial society. Settler colonial society thrives on the fact that it's in a perpetual conflict with the indigenous and thrives on the success of this conflict because of the imbalance of power that it succeeded in creating between themselves and the natives.
So let me suggest that we go around, whoever wants to come around. I wanted to raise a question about the possibility of another transfer. I think one should distinguish between the abstract possibility and between the question of under what conditions and the theoretical practice might take place. Obviously, abstractly speaking, yes, I mean, it's possible that another transfer or method may take place. But the question is, and this is my point, but this point, in my opinion, is irrelevant. The question, the concrete question is under what conditions this could possibly happen. And I assume maybe that it will have to happen under context, in the context of some conflict on the ground. It's not clear with whom. I mean, but let's assume for the sake of argument that there's been a third and that provides the conflict. Then we have different possibilities. Even if one allows, granted your point concerning 1967, that they were more interested in geography rather than demography. Nevertheless, there were attempts, limited, however, to bring about certain degree of transfer. For instance, some locations. For instance, the refugee camp of Ahmed Jabal at the entrance of Jabal was completely empty. The population of about 50,000. In different locations, including in Bethlehem, for instance. And I was an eyewitness to the events. There were attempts to expel people. Were given about 2 hours to leave. I mean, the announcers and loudspeakers. I heard it myself. And many people decided, most people decided to stay and not leave. I think this is a factor that should be entered in the discussion. But my overall point, beyond specific numbers in specific locations, which one might envision that they can be removed or expelled, to have large-scale expulsion, let's say 1 million or 1.5 million from the West Bank, let's say in the direction of Jordan, even Lebanon, is too destabilizing for the region. First of all, for Jordan itself. It's not impossible, if such an event takes place, that Jordan would revert back to being a base for resistance across the river. And this time, with borders adjoining 3 Arab states, Syria, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. And this is very destabilizing for the region, you see, and for those states as well. And we've seen what happened in Iraq. You see, it became, I mean, it was a godsend for Iran in terms of influence, both political and military. You see, and this is a concern now in Israel about the direct line from Iran to Iraq to Syria and to Lebanon. So the question is under what specific conditions this may arise, and to what degree they are likely. I'm not raising this question by way of assuring myself that the possibility is distant. On the contrary, I'm just raising what I think realistic questions.
I'm interested in one issue. You talked about categories, how they're used categorizing people. I'm interested in that in my work on legal studies. And I have a question whether you think what Israel applied to the Arab population in Israel after 1948 and later on is actually going to happen or somehow would happen to other Palestinians. with what is going on here, I see differently. That vaccines are separated and categorized in really different ways. So,
I try to speak in English. I'm not very
Speak in
good.
Arabic.
I
Everybody understands.
I try to. I have the impression from reading some Zionist and Israeli texts that the real strategy in the end of the Israeli leading persons is to ripen a solution with Jordan, in which there will be the famous division, which was called functional, I think, by Peres, between Jordan and Israel. Israel will keep the land and Jordan will get the people with some kind of Palestinian autonomy, but linked to Jordan. Anyway, practically the Jordanians are from now acting as if they are still responsible for the West Bank in some way. That I think is more easier for them than to envision a kind of direct transfer like what happened in 1948 or just after 1967. Even if I found some text of Netanyahu in 1989 where he spoke himself about profiting from the China Tiananmen Square problem to expulse the Palestinians from the West Bank. I think he wrote a memo. He was a member of the Knesset at that time, a memo to the government of Shamir. And this is an article he published in a small magazine in which he proposed this transfer in 1989, and he didn't find Adhan Sama, yani they didn't accept the idea. That's why I want to know your opinion that maybe at the same time they are thinking about this solution with Jordan, which needs more time, more weakening of the Palestinian situation, the Palestinian Authority to ripen. But it seems logical in their perspective, especially after this nationality law.
Well, I want to ask you, Ilan, about how such analysis is related or can be correlated to the way we are running our project as Palestinians in two levels. The level that comes from Ramallah, which is basically based on being completely and always biased to the notion of negotiating the other side and seeing the other options as almost suicidal. On the other hand, the approach that we see is coming from that side, which is grounded in the notion of resistance, but in a very, very unique fashion that reflects the ideological underpinnings of Hamas ideology or Hamas direction. So where do these things really fit in the overall strategy that is in the mind of the power makers or the power holders in Israel? Do they really placed in one basket as irrelevant, unimportant, or they see them differently, and how, if there is a difference really? Thank you.
Just, is it just going to be, the ratings are going, and what seems to be everybody's sentiment now, and sustaining two populations with equal numbers in the same geographical area is, in my opinion at least, just logically is a time. And we know, this is not going to be sustainable on the long run. So are we as Palestinians to think that it's just a matter of time before that a transfer is going to be induced? Or is there something else that one should be looking forward to see where things go?
يعني معلش اقول يعني مش راح يكون في بريك فاللي راح هو الشيء
Actually, George, you remember before, like in December 2002, when I was completely sure that the United States, 3 months before, they will attack Iraq. Actually, you remember when we were in Heidelberg, I sent all the documents from the West Bank to Europe, because I thought if in case Saddam Hussein, the Americans convinced us that there were weapons of mass destruction, so I thought in case of conflict, Saddam will send the chemical weapon, there will be a transfer. So I thought I will send the documents abroad, actually. So since 1980, the question of transfer became an obsession. It's really, part of my days and nights. I know modern things, and actually, I don't understand why Mudar asked this question, because it's you. The Israelis since 1967 is using everything for the transfer, but it's a silent transfer, and I call it. I introduced this concept of sociocide. You create a situation, a daily life, where the only heaven is to leave the country. And actually, some of our friends were unable. They died abroad, like Khalil Mahshi. We see a transfer from Jerusalem, and we see transfer from the land, and then we still questioning about the transfer, especially when we are adopting as a concept settler colonialism. The Israelis took the Australian, New Zealand, and North American model for their state. But when they wanted to, let's say, execute it, it was the mid of the 20th century. It was after Nuremberg. It was the Genocide Convention. So they used since this time, like always, let's say, intelligent methods of transfer. Of course, conflict is, let's say, an important condition for transfer. But as I said, they use other means. The other thing is about apartheid. I see there is a problem between adopting settler colonialism as a paradigm of analysis and concept and apartheid. Really, I don't, and the questions you raise, it makes shadow on this still adopting the concept of apartheid to explain Israeli policies. The last point about the nationalism laws. I think, of course, national laws is against the two-state solutions, but it's mainly against the one-state solution.
Both. Both. Against both.
Yeah, but mainly it is, I mean, it's a response to those who are saying that the demographic danger will create. So this law came as a response mainly, not for the two-state solution, because the two-state solution is over since a long time ago. It's mainly for the one-state solution. Like,
Okay, thanks. Well, I made my points before I heard all of this, and I'm now even more convinced that of what I want to highlight. Firstly, I was surprised at the conclusion, but very relieved. Because from the way the invitation was written, I thought you were saying this is what Ilan was going to say. So I don't think anybody was listening to him, to be honest, from your comments about transfer, really. Ilan made a very, very important point, that Israel has achieved what it needs to do. The Settled Learning Project has achieved what it needs in terms of its long-term strategy, through cantonization, you mentioned a few, I would say, Area A, Area C, Negev, Galilee, East Jerusalem, Gaza. And in each of those areas, as you legal scholars know, different legal regimes, different policy regimes, different economic regimes, different integration with the Israeli economy. So the first point is, please, Ilan, the historian, tell me which Israeli politician said, and was it at the time of Oslo or thereabouts, or much older, maximum number of Palestinian Arabs in the least possible space? That's what's been achieved. The concentration, and this is in Galilee, it's in Negev, so your question about are we going to, long ago we've been in that process of the 48 process, and now it's been really brought up to a state of art almost. And this is also reflecting on your point about calculated, how Israel calculates and how we calculate. We calculate 50-50 or 48-50 demographics. So where is the transfer? Where is the transfer you're talking about? There's been no transfer. We've increased and we've become half of the population. Again, the Arabs, to be very chauvinistic. But Israel doesn't look at it that way. When it makes its calculations, it removes 1.5 million residents. It's considered like Egypt or Jordan or anything else. But in our calculation, it's definitely part of the 50-50. Which takes me to, okay, ethnic cleansing by other means. True, there are other means. There's sociocide, there's people leaving. But we don't ever, all countries have brain drains. Gaza would have a huge brain drain if it could, or huge emigration. We know that. But effectively, this cantonization policy, and maybe Jordan could become another country. Yeah. It could be yet another place to concentrate Palestinians so that the project can continue, etc. And that takes me to the South Africa strategy. They ruled, the whites ruled, the black minority ruled in South Africa, I don't know how many years. Okay, it started quickly, but it remained firmly entrenched. So why can't we have Jewish minority rule in Eretz Israel? Or along the lines that you mentioned. And the final point is specifically about the law. What is your explanation for the fact that the law does not preclude Palestinian national self-determination in the land of Israel? It doesn't, right? Is that Israel looking over its shoulder at the international community? Or is that Netanyahu looking over his shoulder at the Zionist camp? Or is that like a fig leaf to us? Oh, wow. But it's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, but the question asked about Gilad, I was just trying to find out this consistent. I'm sure you got the article where they analyzed this, the expanded contribution to the Oslo.
Yeah.
He claimed he doctored the text. But the result is something that we shall, and whether what he now foresees for the future is consistent with what he. I have to go back to that text and see. But my other remark concerns the subject of the presentation today. It isn't your question, but also ethnic cleansing.
It's the same thing as an invitation.
Right, well, I forgot the invitation. But the thing is that whereas some people talk about one state solution, two state solution, I said there's also other solutions. And when you talk about transfer, non-transfer, I also say there are other solutions. If you look at what's happening in our region these days, it's no longer too far-fetched to see millions moved or killed. Big cities destroyed, Mosul, Aleppo, very good while ago, and I don't know what will be next. So these things are happening. So just to sit back and think that doesn't make sense anymore, it's not very reassuring, because whether this is possible, for me it's already settled. It is possible. The question about the likelihood, how likely it is. And to be reached a threshold where the likelihood is beyond 50%, so that we should finally do something about it. And if so, what is it that we can do about it, that we should do about it? It's not a question that when I expect you to give me a recipe, but it's for everyone.
With regards to the nation state bill, I think perhaps it was a test. In my mind, perhaps Israel was testing how far they can push the minorities or the non-Jews who were co-opted or who have collaborated. And the answer is obviously pretty far. I think we were perhaps a bit generous to the Druze, who they gathered in 50,000 of them in Rabin Square. They were waving Israeli flags. All the speakers at the demonstration were military commanders who spoke of their love for the state of Israel. Zionism was a key facet to the demonstration. So I think it was a test in a way to see how much can these people take, how far can we push them very far. We can tell them that they're trash, we can continue to tell them that they're slaves. I mean, essentially, these slaves were fighting for scraps at the master's table, and it was a very good demonstration. And then the demonstration that was a few weeks later from the other Palestinians, it's also very disappointing. And I think this whole thing, I think it's a very important thing that Palestinians we need to think about in terms of a more new radical strategy that's needed across historic Palestine, but specifically within 48. The reaction of the Palestinian 48 leadership was quite shameful. The members of Knesset, the higher up the follow-up committee, they're talking about, only speaking in Arabic in the Knesset, they're talking about not attending the Knesset for 1 month, taking a break for 1 month. There should have been public resignations. Every single Arab Knesset member should have resigned on the spot, and they didn't. So I think, if anything, even though a lot of people are talking about this bill as a good thing because it reveals the true nature of the state of Israel, it also reveals the true nature of the state of the political situation Palestinians are amongst themselves, and specifically with regards to the 48 community, where they are politically.
My question relates to the transfer hypothesis and what should happen for that to become a real possibility. And I was thinking your analysis was based on looking at political elites vis-a-vis the issues of territory and demography. And I was wondering if we could maybe complicate this picture, including the economy as well, including the kind of considerations that happen, and the role of economic elites as well as political elites. And that was very clear with Oslo and the fact that Israeli capitalists pushed for some kind of peace because they foresaw the economic benefits, and they arrived, right? The so-called peace benefit, peace dividend, and so on. So my question is, what would be the costs and benefits of undoing this status quo that's quite economically beneficial for certain classes of people?
Wow. Very important. Let me begin by saying that I was taking the task trusted in me, trying to first of all explain how I think the Zionist strategy is. And I know that nobody will suspect that I'm supporting it, unless I'm not worried that I didn't represent it officially. But I also does not mean that I think that it's viable or is going to succeed. I think it's very important, and I'll come back to this, if we want to redefine the Palestinian Liberation Project, is to ask ourselves are we analyzing correctly the Zionist project? Because there is a connection between the Zionist strategy and the Palestinian strategy. There's a dialectical connection between the two. And if you analyze it not correctly, maybe also the strategy is wrong. So I think that's what some of the people came. So I'll try and go by the list and see whether I can sort of make sense of some of the comments. One comment was about, and a few of you mentioned, what Salah called silent transfer. I call it incremental transfer. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. You mentioned the transfer of about 300,000 Palestinians in the wake of in the immediate wake of the the June '67 war. So definitely ethnic cleansing continued to take place after the Nakba. Namely, morally, and that's very important, morally, there is no issue for the Zionist strategists to enact ethnic cleansing, further ethnic cleansing. It's not a moral issue. So if it's possible, if the economic price is not too high, if the international community price, this is still a valid option. And this is, you're absolutely right, those of you who commented, this is also an option that they have used, sometimes in an incremental way, as in Jerusalem, where it could be the ethnic cleansing of 2 persons a day, but it still accumulates eventually to something more dramatic, or as in the wake of '67, not to mention ethnic cleansing, we know it. It's not necessarily only chasing you out of your own homeland, it can be chasing you out of your home village. Al-Araqib, we have other examples. Yeah, exactly. So part of the arsenal that Israel believes, or the elite in Israel believes, it possesses in order to maintain the achievement of the settler colonial project includes various forms of ethnic cleansing. So it's not only a question, will it happen? I agree with Salah, it's happening. It is happening. In this respect, I fully agree. There was a second point about the Jordanian option. I think that, after '67, there was a moment where this strategy that I described was reopened for a debate. The reason is that the government that occupied the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, the 13th government of Israel, was the most consensual government Israel ever had. It was the unity government of all the unity governments. Every political shade and party was represented for a year and a half, then it dissolved. But it took decision with the knowledge that it represents the whole spectrum of Israeli politics. And therefore, I think they allowed themselves also to discuss openly things that maybe other governments did not discuss. So, for instance, they discussed whether they can remove the people of Gaza altogether, whether they can move the refugees from Gaza to the West Bank. Tom Sagan writes, has a lot of quotes from these government minutes in his book, 1967. And it's very clear that they did not rule out the possibility of downsizing the number of Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza Strip to make their rule policing the area easier. Another question that they discussed, of course, was Jordan, the sort of functional division between Jordan and Israel, between who has the territory and who has the people, so as you say. I think this died in 1987. And the reason it died was not only because of the Jordanian decision to cede officially from the West Bank, it's because the messianic movement of settlers that looked quite bizarre in the 60s and 70s and complicated for the Labour government its map of Judaization in the West Bank. They started settling in areas which the Labour Party didn't want to settle, densely populated Palestinian areas. This movement that looked like at the margins and not really part of the settler colonial movement of Zionism is now very powerful. And its power reaches also the places where strategy is being maintained and suggested. So I think it's not only, you're right, from a practical Zionist perspective, you can achieve the strategy from a Labour Party perspective with a functional agreement with Jordan. from the people who are now trying to implement this strategy, this is not an option. It's not an option because they really believe that nobody should share with them the land of Israel, not functionally, not politically, not territorially. And I warn us all that these are not marginal groups. It's not surprising that the Israeli Jews who lived in Germany in the 1930s, like Zev Sternham, are warning the Israelis that the same lunatics they identified as lunatics in the 1930s in Weimar, in the Weimar Republic. And everybody said, oh, these are stupid suds, they could never win an election, they could never run the country. They're not a real Germany, right? Took power, took over. And this is something that definitely is a possibility, or at least a possibility to explain why the Judanian option, I think, is not so much on the cards. Apartheid. I want to say something about apartheid and then move to the other things. I think that methodologically, as I understand it, settler colonial movements use all kinds of methods in order to deal with one of the main hurdles for the success of the settler colonial project, which is the presence of indigenous native people. This includes dehumanizing them, sometimes they include genociding them. And I think the way we look at it scholarly, apartheid is another means of achieving the same goal of removing the native as a problem. And I think that, of course, the methods in South Africa are not the methods that Israel uses, but I think that I can understand the activists in the world that are doing the Israeli Apartheid Week in universities and so on, if they connect it to the fact that the Israeli strategy is to have this set of inhuman policies in place in order to maintain a successful status quo. And I think one of the means that they're using is apartheid. One other means is ethnic cleansing. The other one is cantonization. I don't think these are mutually exclusive methodologies. What is really something to discuss, also in view of what Yara said, are two things. One is the Palestinian response to these methodologies the right one? For instance, cantonization means that there are different political rules, games, right? You can be a Palestinian member of the Knesset. You can be a Palestinian member of the Palestinian Council here in Ramallah.
Jerusalem municipality.
Exactly, we vote for the Jerusalem municipality at the end of October. Are these your strategies, or are these the way you abide by the cantonization? And if you don't want to abide by cantonization, how far can you allow yourself to break the rules and so on? And I think at least a discussion should be had, even if the solution is not there. And I think that's why you feel rightly in the way that the Palestinian community in Israel's reaction was this much. What in my view. I agree, but I think it has to do with a lack of redefinition of the liberation concept, a liberation project as it is. I think that the question of the Druze, whether the Israelis succeeded in pushing, the red line of the Druze through the nationality law and see that it worked. I think you're right to a certain extent, but it's too early to say what would be the effect, for instance, of a movement such as Urfut. The young Druze who refused to go to the Israeli army, it's called Urfut, I don't know if you know about it. It's very marginal, I don't think it reflects, but the fact is that Druze are such a small community that even a small group within a small community is meaningful. But time will tell, of course, whether they are working. And altogether, I think that this brings together most of your questions, and I will finish with the economic one. All of your questions of why they didn't include the exclusion of national rights in land, only in the state and not in the land, and what are the conditions in which they would commit transfer, that it's not unthinkable the transfer could be permitted, and that maybe conflict or war is one of the preconditions and so on. One important place to look at, if you want to have some sort of indication of how they think and how you want to react to how they think, is the annual conference that the Israelis have in the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya. Herzliya, the Interdisciplinary Center of Herzliya is the only private university in Israel, and once a year it invites all the people who are part of the strategic group in Israeli politics to give speeches with their visions and understanding. This is one example where Ariel Sharon chose to tell the Israeli public about this idea of disengagement. And now, if you look at these, and these are
Also, where Netanyahu promised the adherence to
two-state solution, exactly. So you need, as I said, Netanyahu said it's a bit like drama. It doesn't really, yeah, it's a Bar-Ilan speech, exactly. But doesn't matter. Even if he said it there, I don't include him in the subject. I insist on it. I don't think he's an important figure in our life. I know it's crazy to say, but I don't think he's, believe me, there are more important people in our life, and are far worse than him. I'm not protecting him. I'm just saying that he's not the worst of them. That's what I'm trying to do. That's the best way to. But if you look at the speeches there in the program, and it's open to the public. These are not secret meetings. It's very clear that the mindset, what we will call in Arabic aqliya, that there is a mindset. First of all, it's not talking about mentality is not scholarly wrong. There is a mentality. It's a DNA. It's a mentality, but it's something that is part of the settler colonial project. I checked them over the years, over the last 20 years, and this is something that it's not news for you, I'm sure, but I think it's the basis for everything we are discussing. And I want to stress, I said it before, but I want to stress it again. It's not a make-believe, it's not people who lie to themselves, who know something and they don't deal with it. There are certain convictions there which are authentic, which are honest and horrific. One conviction, and I think this is something very good, many good people around the world think, surely they cannot think that way, because it's nothing to do with reality, it's nothing to do with the read Shlomo Zan's book about the inventions of Jewish people, and so on. This is misunderstanding how the educational system works in Israel, how the indoctrination works. I know, I'm a product of that. Not a very successful one, as far as I'm concerned, but I'm a product of their educational system. I know how it works. They really believe that they are the indigenous native people of Palestine. Don't for a moment think that they don't think that. It may irritate you, you may think it's bizarre, it's idiotic, but you cannot underestimate their conviction about it. The fact that this is not true, the fact that it's based on lie or fabrication does not undermine whatsoever the power of conviction. And the only debate they have between themselves, and if you know enough about the Hebrew language, you will identify what I say easily in the Hebrew language of the Zionist left. The only debate they always had, from 1884 until today, do we or do we not tolerate the presence of these aliens who took over our land before we redeemed it? That's what you can reach absurd realities in human rights conferences in the United States, where people are really, Americans who are liberals or open-minded say, look at the language that they're using the language of tolerance. And I keep saying to them, yes, this is a Zionist tolerance allowing the natives to stay. This is not the tolerance that you are talking about. It's not the tolerance of the other, of the diversity, of the multiculturalism. This, yes, they translated correctly from Hebrew. The word tolerance, which is lisbol, which the other meaning of the word Hebrew, lisbol, is to suffer. Is to suffer. Lisbol is to suffer. Lisbol is to suffer and to tolerate. So you tolerate by suffering. And so that gives them, this is serious, I'm serious about it. That gives them a sense that they are something special. They can tolerate your presence, although it's a big suffering. Why is it a big suffering? Because it means they don't have the ideal Jewish state with only Jews. Maybe because of that they don't have the whole territory. Maybe because of that they gave up territories. Maybe because of that they can't do everything they want to do as a Jewish state. So they suffer gladly and they tolerate gladly. And I think that's something very, very important. And I met a lot of good Palestinians who refused to accept it, saying, no, come on, we met Yossi Benin, we met these guys from Permeret, and they are for the peace camp, and we met Uriel Neri, and who was a racist, for next to say that Neri was a terrible racist. Yes, he was beaten to death in Berlin, and we should respect him for standing there. But the man was a racist. And because he was a Zionist, and a Zionist, if you're not getting out of this ideology, don't misunderstand this importance of the indigeneity, of the indigenous. Yara wrote a brilliant thesis.
Can I take that issue?
Yeah.
Last thing we just said about
Okay. And then,
then you come to
yeah.
Because this is not against what I thought actually.
Okay.
Because the only way you can nationalize Israel is irrational fear of the Palestinians. There's only if they thought that they are trespassing.
You think they are fearful of you?
What?
I think that's your mistake. If you think that they are afraid
The
of you,
fear, not they're very good with that, not of me. But
But
not about something irrational. But I can only understand that way. For example, the fact that Israel is a strong country, powerful economically, technologically, army-wise, all of that, and still they claim to have the anti-Semitism to the rest of the world. That they are the leader of the nation against so many Muslims, etc., etc. And this is the way I see it.
it is totally
And we
disagree.
can say,
I disagree. I think they feel very secure. They're not afraid of the Palestinians. They're using other people's fear of Islam, terrorism, and so on to justify all the things that they are doing. In fact, their only fear is, if you read the last report by the military correspondent of Arab, which is a clever article actually, Amos Arel, which he said, because we have such an easy enemy which could do whatever we want with these Palestinians, what would happen if we will have to fight a real war? The last one we did in 73. This army will not be able to defeat the proper Syrian, Egyptian, or Lebanese army, he said, because it's a police force, which of course easily enters the Palestinians. But they don't have a tank, they don't have a cannon, they don't have an aircraft. They don't, he says, right, he says, everybody in Israeli intelligence and military infrastructure says the Palestinians are not an existential problem because of the military might. They are an existential problem because of our ideology, not because of, it's different to think that you are a threat because of what you are doing. You are a threat not because of what you are doing. You are a threat by being here. But this is not the existential threat because you are the one who would kill me. It's because I cannot have my dream come true. But I'm elected.
about legitimacy.
Legitimacy.
Let's talk about
No, I tell you. You talk to Mr. Bennett about legitimacy. You talk to Lieberman about legitimacy. That's what I'm saying to you. Certain things about the methodologies of how to sustain the Zeta colonialist movement has changed in it. Yes, you're right. Certain people in the labor movement, by the way, not Ben Gurion, Shimon Peres, maybe, Al Rabin, yes. These people thought that when you use the methodologies to keep alive the Zeta colonial project, you should be careful not to endanger Israel's legitimacy. So you have to use a certain language. They were using a different language. but they were thinking the same thoughts.
But these strategists, these ones who say are
Yeah.
much more influential or worrisome than Netanyahu,
Yeah.
aren't they aware of the power of conviction of Palestinians? I mean, they know that too. They think that they know the Palestinians from Arafat, from Abu Mazen, can't be fought so easily, let's say, at least. And they know that however many Palestinians they turn, so many Palestinians are still against them. I mean, they see that. So this idea that we mentioned is maybe not an irrational fear, but a real serious fear of the Palestinians' own power of conviction. That must factor into their. That must factor into the way they do it.
I think for certain Israelis who would be right to say.
They're not just dismissing the Palestinians.
No. Don't be offended.
No,
I didn't mean to offend anyone. I didn't mean to offend anyone. I started my talk by saying that it's the Zionist state is not very organized on many issues, and it has a lot of failures, and is not very successful in strategizing. When it comes to the Palestinians, the Zionist movement before it, and the state of Israel after it, devotes all its energy and genius, if you want, to deal with people that, let's face it, are very normal. They're very normal people, the Palestinians. They're not even Vietnamese. So they don't have a huge problem in that respect. I think you're absolutely right, but that's why I said I wanted to differentiate between how they think and what I think about what they think.
Yeah.
No, I don't think they will succeed. Don't misunderstand me.
Why isn't the status quo sustainable?
No, I tell you why. I don't think I said, I just hinted because that was not the topic of my talk. I think they're losing the Jewish communities around the world. I think they're losing the younger generation in the civil societies around the world. I think the constellation in the Arab world is temporary. I don't think what we see today in the Arab world necessarily will be there in 50 years. I think that things can change, and I haven't spoken yet to the economic situation, and therefore I think that they may find themselves not so successful as they think. I wish I would have said to you, with all genuine belief, that the way I see today the Palestinian resistance, this is the main factor that bring them down. But I'm among friends. To say that next year the Palestinian resistance will bring down the state of Israel is not a responsible sentence. It's not a responsible sentence, I'm sorry. That's what I'm saying. And they know it. I'm not saying that the Palestinians don't have the power to do much more. Of course they do have them, with unity, with redefinition, but I'm not here as an advisor, but as the national movement. And again, I think in the long run, you're absolutely right. The only people who can legitimize the presence of Jews in the long run in the land of Palestine and other Palestinians, any other legitimacy is irrelevant. But I wish they would think that way. I wish they would think that way. When you talk about legitimacy in a very normal and moral way, which is not the way Israelis talk about legitimacy. For Israelis, legitimacy is more or less what the Americans did in the Cold War when they differentiated between our dictator and the dictator of the other side. That's why international law is a curse in Israel. It's a word of curse. It's not a word of they don't even celebrate. Also post-Cold War. Our son. You're right. Son of a bitch. That's why I think that it's slippery. It's two kinds of analysis. One is the analysis of what will go wrong to the settler colonial project. And I think you're right. What will go wrong to that is the Palestinians would not disappear, but the Palestinians would continue to resist, and they are the only people who could give them legitimacy. That's what will go wrong for them, among other things. But this is not their greatest fear. I hope they're wrong. Yeah.
One very last
question.
Are there any now arising potential natural allies for the Palestinians in Israeli society besides Ilan Pappe?
I don't know.
You others. Well, whatever, exactly.
Yeah, coming back.
Precisely.
Okay. I'll come back to that. I just want to say something I forgot about what Francesco said, because I think it's very important. How to calculate the economic reality into this. And you're right, the captains of the Israeli economy were the greatest lobby for the Oslo Accord because they saw the dividends of trade with the Arab world and with the Palestinians. The neoliberal economy that Israel has now certainly would not enjoy any rocking of the boat, any dramatic change. It does not also sees as an economic disaster the continuation of the status quo and making a lot of money out of it. So that's very important. So I think the issue is different. The issue is, I just finished the book on this, with the whole chapter on the political economy of Israel. There I claim, I don't know if I'm right, I claim that there is a difference in Israel between macroeconomy and microeconomy. Why do I say I shouldn't have written this book? Because I'm not an economist, I don't understand anything about economy. But I feel like I got it much better than the economists this time. On macroeconomic terms, Israel is one of the most successful stories in the OECD. In fact, it was one of the successful story during the crisis of 2008. It did better than all the other members of the OECD. In 2008, with the Palestinian Authority, that's right. We still well on macroeconomics. Microeconomically, what I mean by microeconomically is that these fantastic statistics do not expose fully the growing gaps within the society, which are still related to ethnic origins within the Jewish society, between Jews from Arab countries and Jews from European countries, between the periphery and the center, the crisis of the middle class in Israel that used to live in something that you used to call overdraft, where you could, your salary was not the amount of money on which you live. You live double on your salary. You got your salary, and the bank immediately said to you, think as if you had double your salary, and we will cover it for you. Don't worry. You'll pay later on. And the banks are not using this system anymore. They're not willing to use the system anymore. And the middle class suddenly has to live according to the salaries that it gets. And these are not enough to buy a house. These are not enough to live even basic normal life as they see the right to live in it. And even the government's policy of subsidies and so on doesn't help them to maintain. And I think these and many others, I don't have time to go into these issues, I think, bring to the fore the interaction between neoliberalism and settler colonialism in a very interesting way. In a way that shows that if you want as a settler colonialist project to deal through neoliberal thinking with the issue of demography, or even security by, privatizing the checkpoints, for instance, privatizing probably the demographic policy, you will run into troubles because you're going to deal with cost benefit and not with ideological implementation. So I think that's a very weak point in the Israeli strategy. Very, very weak point. I don't think we see it yet because there are all kinds of other things that are still working for them. Among them, the disunity and weakness of the Palestinian liberation movement, the realities in the Arab world, Trump, of course, with his policies. So this all creates a fog which says the status quo is well maintained. I agree. I think the economy will be a factor. We haven't, I'm not going to do it now because I'm tired, but not only conflict can lead to ethnic cleansing, also an economic crisis can lead to ethnic cleansing. Israel did a very clever kind of, I don't know if you could call it even ethnic cleansing, but it was kind of a transfer of people. When economically it wanted to absorb 1 million Jews from Russia, it removed silently, without declaring, a lot of Palestinians from positions that they handed over to the Russian immigrants, and caused immigration of quite a lot of Palestinians from inside Israel abroad because of that. So that was an economic ethnic cleansing. It was not putting people on barriers, people on this. People had to leave because it was not sustainable anymore to be there. So this is also a dimension that I agree with.
And on the same point, like the kind of became a conventional argument in secular political studies in Palestine that Palestinians are not anymore like, for benefiting the Israeli economy in terms of labor,
Right.
and that could facilitate the kind of ethnic cleansing in the future, and it's kind of it became a famous argument.
Yeah.
So are you taking the same position on that, and you seeing that link, or are you seeing like in a different kind of like people would argue that Palestinians also the big market for the Israeli maybe micro or small industries and
I think it's more complicated. The neoliberal economy sees Palestinians, especially inside Israel, Palestinians authors, as an asset sometimes. You know, they can add to the high-tech technology, they can be hired cheaper, on a cheaper level. They are much more at your mercy because they are a discriminated group. So you can give them much less in terms of rights and so on. So on the one hand, there is
some experimentation.
okay.
I mean,
Sorry.
we can do some
Experimentation as well. Absolutely, absolutely. You're right. Right. So in a way, this is an incentive to say I can allow more Palestinians into the Israeli labor market, which is quite local, without endangering the raison d'etre of the settler colonial project. The thing is, where they might find themselves in trouble, these neoliberal industrialists and so on, is with the fact that what I said, what looked at the time in 67 to 74, looked really, to most Israelis, they looked like nutcases. These people who came to the West Bank, they really looked like nutcases. And people said, you know, they are not an important part of what Zionism is. They are just, you know, weeds that would disappear. These weeds are now very powerful. And they see some of the neoliberals as enemies. I tell you exactly what it reminds me. The way the Nazis called themselves National Socialists and targeted some of the big industrialists in Germany for not being patriotic enough and having too many capitalist considerations instead of having Aryan considerations. We can reach that as well. This will be another, when this will happen, it will happen. We will again meet here, and I will tell you, now the world will do something. Surely, I mean, they will see how ridiculous is their support for this state. And again, I'm not sure the world in its present constellation, with its own neoliberal ideologies combined with the sectarianism and factionism, would yet be able to say, oh, this is unbearable, unacceptable, and so on. But yeah, but I think these things are, there is a clash there between capitalist consideration, neoliberal consideration, and the kind of messianic version of settler colonialism now is becoming dominant in Israeli life when it used to be quite marginal.
So it's not Jerzy Werther and some whatever it's the Mizrahi, the poor Orthodox Jews that we should be thinking about.
I think so.
If we could.
If we could, yeah, I think this is a
common
topic.
cause.
I agree.
Probably eventually the settlers make that.
If the neoliberal crisis that you mentioned were to ever hit, then
Can I allow myself
wait for that. Wait for that.
Yeah, no, I do have a couple of, I don't know if there are questions, but two things that I missed in this discussion.
Okay.
One, let me put it this way. I don't know who the guy was. I heard something on TV, quite interesting. Somebody was describing the results of the nationality law as a two-state solution with a pure democratic Jewish state in the 48 part and an apartheid Palestinian state, where the settlers are controlling the Palestinians on this side, but the apartheid question will become the problem of the other state, not Israel,
Right.
not of Israel. It's an interesting kind of description of the situation. And if we are to look at, a typical colonial development whereby the Palestinians are to be used as cheap labor, etc., and not in the form of the Israeli situation where labor is Jewish and not cheap. Versus a typical colonial condition. So you can have two situations, and you have also the privilege of having this apartheid state divided into Gaza and the West Bank, and you can manipulate and deal with these and those, and different concentrations and so on and so forth. How does this all together shape the strategy of Zionists, and how does it settle the compromise that I think the person who in the Zionist movement who came very clear to settling was Shimon Peres, when he realized that you can either have a Jewish state or an Arab Israel. You cannot have both, and you have to choose. And he made the choice according to what you've been describing. Actually, he made the demographic choice, not the territorial. He said, the territory we can be big on industry, on export, and what have you, as long as we are pure and Jewish. And my second thing is, I really miss any disunity. When I hear you, I miss the disunity in the Israeli community or in the Israeli society. You talk of them like the good old PLO guys, as if they are sort of one group. And when you divide them, you again divide them ethnically into originally Arabs and originally Arabs, or maybe maybe introduced the Russians a little bit now, etc. But what about some class analysis? What about some other factors of disunity within the Israeli society? Which brings us to a question someone asked the two here, which is there really a peace camp, a real peace camp? Not a Zionist peace camp, but a peace camp.
Yeah, I forgot this question. Sorry. Yeah. First of all, I did the class analysis. I just said, this was the class is still very closely reflecting ethnic and therefore, if you want to understand the failure of the Israeli Communist Party to have any influence on the Arab Jews, the Iraqi Jews, is the fact that they decided that there is no correlation between the fact that they were Arab Jews and that they were working class. So they still insist on the Israeli Communist Party today. And this is why their analysis is not working, because there is a reason there is a correlation between them being sort of Arabs and their socioeconomic conditions. It's very important. Whether you are considered Arab, yes, you are now a de-Arabized Arab, which is nice, but you're still an Arab. You're a de-Arabized Arab. You still have a lot to do to prove yourself, and that's why many of them will go to the right-wing parties to prove better than who they are. There is a lot of disunity in the There is a lot of disunity in the Israeli society, but there is no, and I think that's the nature of such a colonial project. There is no disunity in this particular facet of the ideological worldview, because it's very reductionist, because it's very focused, it's not very complex. It's what you think about the population that you have colonized. Sorry?
It's them or us.
It's them or us. It's almost like the primitive definition of the power of nationalism. It works on dichotomy. It works on this kind of simplistic idea where it's not that easy. The only way of finding diversity in it is to get out of it. And when you get out of it, you're a traitor. You're not part of it. So you can't hope for a diversity in it because it's so demanding as a powerful signifier, definer of who you are. And therefore, I think that the whole Palestinian, there was a Palestinian strategy. I still hear it from Madani in the PLO when I go to meet. I still hear it from people close to Abu Mazen. The whole strategy that says there is a diversity in the Israeli political system, not just peace camp. Peace camp. And therefore we need to strengthen it. We need to find a way of doing it. I think is a wrong analysis. It has nothing to do with the reality. Now, is there an Israeli left? Yeah. And I will finish. The Israeli left, and so on. I think that the demise of the two-state solution, the decline of Oslo, the rise of the Israeli right wing as a powerful factor, not just a marginal factor, has destroyed the liberal Zionist left, which is a good thing. What replaces it is a very small alternative culture of NGOs, civil society, which is growing, which really thinks that outside of the box, out of the ideology, out of the mentality. It's so young and so fresh that it's difficult to even try to assess its importance. But it exists, yeah.
That means it's also very limited by the discourse of international law. And we have to be very careful.
Yeah, you're right.
And so, even though a lot of them are doing good work, it has seen civil society in 48, it's beholden to the donor community. And I think we have to be very careful in expecting a lot from that people. And whilst they are probably the ones that will do work outside that's important, that's what we have to encourage, is the political work outside of things like
I totally agree with you, but at least they're using a different discourse in the liberal science. You're right. You're right. They have a long way to go, and I think one of the problems.
What about the assumption that there is some kind of new generation that lost its ideological roots and more like middle class, Tel Aviv, kids? I don't know. I'm just hearing these kind of argumentation.
It exists. It definitely exists of the young people who. That's maybe the best thing to say. You refuse to serve the Israeli army for two reasons. Either ideologically, because you don't want to be part of the army ideologically, which is a small group, or you don't go to the army because you want to live happier, normal lives. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, which is bigger than the ideology. Will this be a problem for Israel in the long run? Probably yes. For the time being, it's very interesting what the army says about it. The army says, again, coming back to the Palestinians, to handle the situation, we need help. Barak says it very clearly. We don't need a recruitment of everyone. We need a small professional army. There will be enough Israelis who want to be part of it. So people who are Zionists say to him, remember David Ben-Gurion said, we need the army not just to protect the borders or defeat the enemies, we need the army to be the melting pot of all the different immigrants groups. And Barak said, that was when we needed the melting pot. We don't need the melting pot anymore. We have the final product already working.
Now they
working.
Now they will make in the morning.
In the morning.
Yeah. Still a very important melting pot for the
It is in more jobs. I talk about the ethos. The ethos now, it's very important to look at the education system, including the PS, but also education systems are very important because they indicate something. And the Israeli education system has moved back to this idea that we call it romantic nationalist ideas, and not anymore about an immigrant society or melting pot. This is not the strength. Does not come from the achievement of teaching Hebrew to Jews who came from Yemen and Jews who came from Belarus, which was the old narrative. The narrative is they are all suckling from the same fountain of national energy, and that's why they are strong. Not because of the Upa, not because they all learn Hebrew, but because they are. Because finally, the political system and the historical faith are working hand in hand. That's the way they talk.
like Avatar.
Avatar, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's enough.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with those. It's an overdose.